OCD is one of the most common anxiety disorders in growing children. It affects just over 1% of people in the UK every year, from any race, creed, class or gender. Sufferers have intrusive obsessive thoughts that can cause extreme anxiety that then compel them to repeatedly perform compulsive behaviours aimed at reducing that anxiety. These compulsions can include excessive cleaning, repeated check-in or extreme hoarding. In Anna's case, she washes her hands often dozens of times a day. Anna, can you explain your OCD to me?
It's mainly about like a fear of getting ill, so a fear of germs and stuff mainly. So I wash my hands a lot, I don't touch things.
And do you know why you developed that fear?
Not sure.
But
It sort of happened.
But you worry that you might get ill?
Yeah.
Do you know what sort of illness?
Just any kind of, well, illnesses you can catch, but just any kind of illness.
When it's at its worst, what's it like?
I just can't touch anything. I just wash my hands all the time. My hands get quite cracked and dry. And yeah.
How's it for you? Do you really understand it?
Sort of, but there's some things that I don't really understand. Like, well, I'll do one thing but not something else.
While we all worry about getting ill and avoid germs where we can, Anna's obsessive thoughts are irrational in the extreme. Have you been ill recently at all?
No.
No.
I'm not really sure why I'm scared of getting ill.
But it's the thing that you fear the most?
Yeah. So it's just like constantly a voice in my head saying like, you have to do it or you'll get ill. It's like there's someone standing there telling me to do it.
Come in, Laverne.
Okay.
If you just take a seat on that stool there, that's great.
Dr. Adam Perkins of King's College London is an expert on the psychology of fear. He has a test that can measure how well we respond to threats.
Because the hypothesis is that the more intense you defend yourself, the more anxious you are. So you're the green dot and you're chased by the red dot. The harder you push the joystick, the faster the green dot goes. OK, so if you pop your headphones on, we'll get underway.
The joystick runway test is designed to simulate the anxiety anyone might feel by being chased. The player's anxiety level should rise as the dots come closer together and peak if the green dot is not driven away fast enough.
Anxiety has evolved as a defensive response. As long as you survive to have kids, that's how natural selection works. To make your survival count, you have to produce kids. And so if being anxious means that when there's a blood bubble coming out of your baby's nose, you think, oh, something's going on here, I'm worried, I think I'll go to the doctor, then your baby will have more of a chance of surviving. Most animal species of all kinds have some kind of threat withdrawal mechanism. So if you tap a snail on its shell, it'll curl up into the shell. So there's been a long evolutionary pressure, a selection pressure on animals to get away from a threat. The more complicated the animal, the more abstract it seems to become. So a snail doesn't really get anxious about the meaning of life. Once you get up to primates, great apes, humans, that's really when you start getting proper angst.
And you've got my results there. Can you tell me how I did?
Yep, you're significantly lower in your threat responsivity than average. You're just not as bothered as our average female participants by the threat that was chasing you in the task.
Like most people, I am able to control my anxiety. But for Anna, her obsessive fear of getting ill has taken over her life. Over the last few months, Anna has been keeping a detailed diary about her OCD, how many times a day she washed her hands to alleviate her anxiety. So if we look at one of the days, just take the first one we come to. between 7 o'clock and 10 o'clock, and it's a weekday, so probably at school?
Yeah.
You tell me.
Between 10 a.m. and 1 p.m. I wash them once, but I use hand gel twice. Then between 1 and 4, I wash them once, but use hand gel 3 times. Between 4 and 7, I wash my hands 12 times and use hand gel once. Then between 7 and 10, I wash my hands 11 times.
Right, so all in all, 10, 30, about 35, 37 times in a day.
37, yeah.
That's quite a lot, isn't it?
Yeah, that was less than I do now.
That's less than you do now?
Yeah.
So how often do you think you wash your hands now?
Between about 40 and 50.
So it's gone up?
Yeah.
Quite a lot.
Yeah.
Anna has her own bathroom, so much of her hand washing is hidden away from the rest of the family.
We didn't sort of notice, it was harder to tell because she's in her room, which a lot of teenagers are, so we don't know what she's doing in there. But obviously there were times when we've been hammering on the doors. And also other times when we'd go out, you've still got to wait for Anna. So obviously, yeah, you do lose your patience sometimes.
Anna knows that her anxiety is irrational, but it doesn't stop her having the obsessive thoughts. That's one of the effects of OCD, that sufferers can't get these intrusive thoughts out of their heads.
My hunch is that there's another trait to do with your capacity to be imaginative and visionary. And you're not fully anxious unless you're not only sensitive to threat, but also you've got this kind of abstract mindset where you tend to think a lot about stuff that isn't happening. If you've got both of those, you probably will end up being what we would call a highly neurotic or highly anxious person, the kind of person who may then end up having to have psychiatric help.
At the back of my head, I'm thinking you don't need to do it. Like, you're not going to get ill from touching a door handle, but then there's still a stronger voice in my head saying, no, you will, you need to go and wash your hands.
The latest hypothesis is that the brain systems that control defence have evolved over, millions of years to keep us safe. These systems are just overactive.